This is a podcast by the Straits Times.
So for teenagers, they're going through a very tumultuous period because they are developing very rapidly in terms of their thinking, their thoughts, processors, their feelings, and physiological changes. Nowadays, we encourage them to talk. Talking does help to reduce stress. It may not solve your problems, but you feel heard and you feel that you're not alone. It makes them feel better about themselves.
That's true. You don't have to hide it, right? And then when you hide it, sometimes you don't know how to handle it as well. Hello everyone, I'm Joyce Teo and welcome to Health Check. So many parents, they spend time teaching their kids essential skills like reading, but the skill that will determine their success, their relationships, and their overall happiness is often the one we forget to teach, and that is emotional regulation. This was the focus of a recent panel discussion that I moderated for the Parents Connect 2025 event organized by the Singapore Association of Mental Health, or SAMH. It is such a vital conversation and one that we want to continue. So today we're focusing entirely on helping children truly understand and confidently manage those big emotions. And joining us in the studio for a deeper dive is one of the key panelists in that SAMH discussion, Dr Ong Say, a child and adolescent psychiatrist. He's a senior consultant psychiatrist at the Institute of Mental Health. Dr Ong is also the chairperson of Creative Services and the Youth Committee at SAMH. Hi, Dr. Ong. Thanks for making time today to join us on Health Check.
Hi, Joyce. Thanks for having me today.
We're going to talk about emotional regulation, right? It's a term that I guess keeps coming up among parents, but some parents may not even know what emotional regulation is because they were not taught these skills themselves.
I mean, you're right. We really should talk and define what emotional regulation is, right? In simple terms, emotional regulation is the ability to hold emotions and influence the experience of emotions and ultimately the expression of that emotion in order to achieve a goal or function. So it happens when someone is triggered, then he or she may have an emotional response, and important question is, what are you going to do about that emotions? Yeah. I compare it to like a air conditioner thermostat, whereby you can adjust the temperature. When the environment is too cold, you turn up the temperature. When the environment is too hot, you turn down the temperature. So you adjust and calibrate accordingly to get the best ambient temperature, right? So when someone is upset or angry, we definitely want to tone their emotions down. So it could be more calm and feeling more relaxed so they can think more clearly what to do next.
Right. So I guess that will be different for children and for teenagers, right?
Well, the skills of emotional regulation very much depends on the brain development. When the child is very young, the brain is not so well developed. They may not have that right skills yet. But as a teen adolescent, after puberty, the brain is rapidly maturing and developing. So the skills typically do get better and better with age.
I see. Okay, so I wanted to ask you see families like every day at work, right? Tell us, what is the most common problem that you see among these families?
Well, the slight difference between the young children and older teenagers, I'll just talk about young children first, typically below 12. They tend to present with more developmental problems that affects their learning or their attention focus, right? For the older children, and I do see teenagers up to the age of 19, they tend to present with more mood symptoms like anxiety, or just feeling down or feeling sad, and they don't know how to deal with it, right? So these are usually the more common presentations between the two age groups.
I see. So how does the typical Singaporean family deal with emotions?
Well, Singapore being an Asian country, and we are largely Asians, we tend to keep emotions to ourselves, right? Yeah.
Correct.
As old saying goes, you don't talk about feelings. Be seen and not heard.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. So a lot of children were taught how to keep quiet about their feelings. And sometimes the adults are not helping because the adults say that this is normal. Why are you feeling like that? You go away.
Because they don't know, I think.
Exactly.
And they will say, stop crying, that's it.
So the parents may come across as a bit dismissive and not validating the child's feelings. So the child tend to grow up just keeping things to themselves because they feel that the adults don't listen and don't validate their feelings. So with time, that means that as they grow up to be adolescents, they might still do the same and not talk about difficult feelings. The home appears to be like you can only talk about good things but not bad things. But in life, we have both, right? Good things and bad things, good feelings and bad feelings as well, right? So a lot of people struggle with labeling their feelings, like they feel sad or they feel aggravated or they feel frustrated or things like that. They feel that it is against their own teaching, right? And it's embarrassing to talk about it because it's a sign of weakness. If you feel bad or that means you can't control yourself, it's a sign of weakness. And this may play out right into adulthood and it's going to affect relationships, right? So for teenagers, they're going through a very tumultuous period because they are developing very rapidly in terms of their thinking, their thoughts, processors, their feelings and physiological changes. Nowadays, we encourage them to talk. Talking does help to reduce stress. It may not solve your problems, but you feel heard and you feel that you're not alone. It makes them feel better about themselves.
That's true. You don't have to hide it, right? And then when you hide it, sometimes you don't know how to handle it as well. Right, that's interesting. I mean, during the panel discussion, we talked briefly about the first signs of a child struggling emotionally, right? So I wanted to go deeper into that. So you mentioned that emotional worry in children often present themselves as physical complaints, right? So what are some of the subtle signs that can also come up?
Right. In children, sometimes they may become temperamental or they may throw temper tantrums. Sometimes they will be less cooperative with their parents and not do their routines. And of course, they can get somatic or physical symptoms like pains and aches. And then they might also avoid school, especially if the triggers for his emotions are from school. For teenagers, they may express emotions in the same way, but they could also present with social withdrawal, keeping more to themselves, avoiding family activities altogether, not joining family meals. They may also display some conduct behavioral problems. They may be more irritable. They may be more disrespectful. They may have some minor disciplinary problems. And for some, they may gravitate towards gaming or internet as a way to escape, and to manage their difficult feelings.
Right. I mean, that's interesting. But for teenagers, right, I think some of these problems may come up anyway, right? So for a parent, how can you tell whether it's just normal teenage angst or something that needs more attention?
True. I mean, that's a difficult thing to discern which is which, right? Isn't it? But I believe that parents would know the kids very well, especially when they already have a clear channel of communication from the very beginning when the kids are young, and it's easier to spot any difference or change if you already had that communication channel. So if a child had a bad day, usually the emotional symptoms will be transient or quite brief and the child bounces back quite quickly. But if the changes persist and becomes prolonged, it's very likely to affect functioning, like how the child studies or cope with schoolwork, how the child socializes with friends and family. So that would be a clue that something's not right.
The combination of the factors as well.
Exactly. A typical example is a teenager started to refuse school going or become very cranky, irritable, would get upset over very small things, spend significant amount of time in his or her bedroom, stay up really late and not able to wake up in time for school. So those are really red flags. I would suggest that have a good talk with the teenager and without any judgment or blame because you don't know what's going on. And if the child or the teenager is still not so forthcoming, you could also speak to the school personnel, like a form teacher or school counselor, whether they notice any signs. Because a teenager spends a third of the time in school. A lot of things can happen in school. Demands of certain tasks, friendship issues, bullying, so on and so forth, right?
That's true.
So as a parent, you need to really get all the information, as much information as possible.
So those are the signs that tells you that you need to start to talk to your child or your teenager.
Yeah. Don't wait till the teenager or child start hurting themselves. Some resort to self-harming, self-cutting. That would be a real alarm already. Don't wait till that stage. Have the conversation early. Let the teenager know that you're here for them and you're available for them.
But when a child is overwhelmed by intense emotions, right, and then you want to talk to them, but you also want to respect their need for independence, how do you go about talking to them?
Yeah, it can be quite a delicate balance, right? You don't want to be too overbearing and overstep. But likewise, you cannot be too relaxed about it or too distant or detached from it. So it's to strike really a balance. The messaging is very important. You can't read each other's mind. Don't expect the child to understand what you're thinking and vice versa. So I think as a parent, it's very legitimate to say that you're concerned because you observe something and you're not sure what's it about and whether you could be of any help to the child. Sometimes the child may not be so accessible, as in like he or she may not want to speak up. Don't give up, just keep trying. And sometimes they're not very comfortable just talking out their problems. You might want to create some opportunities or scenarios where they are a little bit more relaxed. Bring them out for a walk or do something or go for a movie. And then you can start actually throwing some questions to probe. Right? Don't be too abrupt as well. Yeah. Kids are now all about authenticity. They'll suspect you're up to something if you just come up with something out of the blue. So you just be natural and let the conversation flow. And sometimes you can use live examples, like you watch a movie and the characters are behaving this way. So you could talk about the character and then maybe something will unfold. If the child is not comfortable with speech, then he or she may be more comfortable with writing. So sometimes they do keep journals and diaries, and maybe you can ask them whether it's okay if they can write about it or show a piece of journal to you. And some of them may be more comfortable texting or WhatsApping or writing on Telegram. So maybe that could be a channel or so for you to connect with your teenager.
Right. Doesn't have to be just a talk, right?
Yes.
Because nowadays they just text, basically. Okay. So which brings us to this question. I wanted to talk about screens because it's such a big thing, right? So first off, I wanted to ask you, how does that constant access to the screens actually change their developing brain's ability to handle boredom and regulate mood?
Yes. Computers, internet, social media, they're all giving you a lot of information in rapid succession. So sometimes for a growing brain, the brain becomes accustomed to that. But in our daily life, when you talk about schoolwork, studies, and homework, things are not so fast. And suddenly you have to put a pause in front of the kid and say, slow down. You could do this math sum one step at a time. They may not be able to adjust to that because they're so used to rapid fire.
Yes.
Right. So it becomes very boring to them when they have to sit down for a extended period of time to read or to do a problem sum for the matter. Right. That's why having limits on screen use is so important. And in recent years, we have Singapore ministries have published some data and also some guidelines for parents and caregivers into how to limit the screen time for different age groups of children. All right. We are not saying that screen time is all bad. It certainly can facilitate learning and also connection when you're doing games together or watching a program together in some way, right? But it has to be sort of specific to the needs of the child. And it should be under supervision as well,
When they're very young.
When they're very young, especially. So this kind of limitation should be maybe implemented way early so that it becomes part and parcel of the child's growing years. So can you imagine if the child has free access to internet and suddenly in the middle of teenage years, you say cannot, and I have to limit it. The child is going to, teenager is going to, of course, rebel and oppose that proposition, right? Isn't it?
Right.
So it has to start from the very beginning, how you inculcate good digital literacy.
But, say for a parent listening in and they have not done anything, they've given them free rein, right, to use how much screen time you want. And now they are more aware and they want to do something about it. Do you have any tips for talking to teenagers about that? Because some of them might be worried about putting in controls, right? I mean, you don't want your child to hate you or anything like that.
It can be a tough conversation to have. But I think if the parents are genuinely concerned, they could have a family meeting to really discuss this and maybe share their observations and also provide evidence that maybe it has some negative impact on the child. And also get as much feedback as possible from maybe school teachers or counselors. Don't just hear it from the parents, but the more feedback you get, the more ammunition you have. Ultimately, I think we want to appeal to the reasoning abilities of the child. It's like, hey, we know that screen time is essential for you to stay connected to your friends, but your friend cannot be accompanying you and playing games all through the night till day breaks, right? And for a growing child, you need as much rest as possible so they can grow appropriately and also would have the necessary focus and attention for the next day as well. Lack of sleep is well proven to show poor mental health, poor physical health, and poor ability to focus and attend in school the next day. So I think a lot of parents maybe had a little bit of difficulty because they don't reason, they don't explain why they're concerned about it, or they don't let the teenager have a voice to speak up, or they could be very judgmental, right? Saying things like, you just play games all day. But a teenager may say that when I'm doing my homework on the computer, you never say anything, all right? So I think having a good conversation, stating the facts, non-judgmental, get a all-rounded kind of feedback will be able to maybe help the teenager understand that perhaps they have been spending too much time on the screen and they need to cut back. And if they cut back, what would constitute a reasonable cutback as well, right?
To discuss that actually,
you
right?
need to have that conversation as well. It cannot be cold turkey, right? I think it's impossible to say that you cut 100%, absolutely no contact on social media or with friends for the matter. But set some reasonable rules, provide clear guidelines, and screen time can be used as a reward as well to reinforce the desired behavior, the positive behavior you want to see as well, right?
If it works.
Yeah, if it works.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's also important for parents to be a little bit interested in what their kids are doing online as well. So if the kids are playing games, maybe adults might also want to play along to know more about this game so that you're on the same level of playing field, right? So like I said earlier, connecting your child online could be a way to have a breakthrough in the communications.
Right, have a breakthrough.
Well,
I think that's the
right?
key.
Yeah.
And it's a patience, right? We need a lot of patience in doing that. It sounds like it can be a long process, right?
It can be.
Right. I mean, actually, I just wanted to ask you, among the cases that you see, right, what are the more common cases in Singapore, at least?
I think for most kids, they do not have a mental health disorder. And if you talk to them, show them the facts and evidence, negotiate a reasonable kind of mutual understanding, I think they tend to work out. But sometimes there might have been mental health problems. For example, a teenager with concurrent attention deficit hyperactivity disorder,
ADHD.
or autism spectrum disorder. They may find it difficult to follow through with adults' instructions. Like, for example, a kid with ADHD may not be able to listen or may not be able to do foreplanning. They can be more impulsive, so they may not be able to follow through with the instructions or guidelines. For a kid with autism spectrum disorder, may be very fixated or preoccupied or obsessed about a certain game, and they just couldn't let go.
Then how do you help them manage their emotions?
So those would have to be mitigated through other ways because those are mental health disorders which need their own treatment and interventions.
Oh,
right?
if it's serious medications or other stuff.
Medications for ADHD, or if the child with autism spectrum may have some anxiety issues, so you may have to treat the anxiety. We may have to teach them additional skills to organize themselves, to deal with difficult feelings, problem solve, learning through social stories, all these things, etc., etc. So the approach would be different in those regards if there's a mental health disorder.
Okay. Actually some parents, they worry that their children may get a mental health disorder, because of the stress that they face in everyday life. I mean, how likely is that?
Well, fortunately, most kids are quite resilient, so they don't often get a mental disorder just because of a setback. But if the setbacks or stressors are chronic and persistent, and if they're particularly severe, then the child may have a higher risk of developing a mental health problem. So a young person with adjustment disorder may persist on to develop a mental health disorder like major depression if the stressor is persistent and chronic, or even toxic. You heard about toxic stress, right?
Toxic stress, and can you explain that a little bit for us?
Yeah, toxic stress are very chronic and persistent. It could include also abuse and neglect as well. It really makes the child feel so helpless about the situation. Yeah, especially when there's also threats of violence and aggression, such that their own natural resources and coping mechanisms just no longer work anymore. So the stress becomes so toxic in that sense. So I think it's important to really monitor the child's behavioral response over a long period of time and look out for whether there's any emergence of new symptoms or escalation of symptoms. Typically, if the stressor is removed, usually the child would return to their own previous premorbid functioning.
Right, interesting. So helping children manage their emotions, actually, we got to start early. Parents got to start talking to them, connecting with them, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So do you have like a simple go-to emotional first aid technique for parents to, ground themselves during acute situations when there is a lot of anger or a lot of stress?
I think the most important thing is that a parent has to role model, because a child would look at a parent and also make an assessment how they should react as well. We call it mirroring. The child may mirror adults' behavior and emotion state as well. So when tackling any challenging situation, it is very pertinent for the adult to keep as calm as possible. They need to do a self-check to make sure they are calm and clear in their mind. I'm not saying that they should neglect or not talk about their own feelings. Adults are humans as well. They also have to talk about feelings.
Yes.
But they have the upper hand because they're more well-developed cognitively in their brain development. So they have to do a self-check. And if they're not quite ready to have a conversation with the child or teen, they should maybe defer the conversation till later when they're more calm. This is to prevent any escalation of the situation, which is already bad to begin with. So the child would appreciate that, and also may also emulate that behavior, that they can actually walk away from the situation when they're not ready.
They can also learn that, right?
Exactly.
If you can't, you take a break.
Exactly. Right, yeah. So it also gives you time to think about what you're going to say as well. And experience will tell you if you say something, you're likely to get a certain reaction from the child. So you have to choose the best option, what works the best for you and the child in that given situation. Right?
Yeah, that's interesting. But like you said, we're all humans. Parents also lose their temper sometimes, right? So what is the most immediate thing you can do actually to kind of repair the damage? So let's say if you lose your cool, you did something that you don't really want to do, but you did.
Yes. Right. Sometimes adults may say things that they don't mean to, like they may inadvertently dismiss the child's feelings or blame the child for, things like that. So I think it's perfectly all right to say, sorry, I was just too angry and upset and I said the wrong thing, because it takes great courage for an adult to say sorry.
To their child.
Yeah, to the child. And there's nothing wrong with making the wrong choice, but you at least be aware and you try to rectify it. So I think not go with the idea that the person who has the last word in is the winner, right? This is not a challenge. So it's like being able to take a step back, approach each other in a calm manner, be non-judgmental, strive to understand where the other party is coming from first. By understanding the other person, then you know how you should moderate or adjust your expectation. Because a lot of times we get upset, but we do not know what the other person is thinking about. We tend to prejudge, right? Or the person is wrong or things like that. He's just, my son or daughter is just out to make me angry, to spite me and things like that. So without that mutual understanding, you often end up being in an impasse. You can't move on. And then this will keep accumulating over time. And then, it's going to put a strain on the parent-child relationship.
So that's the chance to actually talk to them as well when you say sorry,
exactly.
And then you try and find out more as well.
Yeah, so help me understand what you're going through. Help me understand why you did that.
It's all about communication. Right. I mean, earlier, you also previously mentioned something like we shouldn't shield the children from negative things, right? It's okay, talk to them about it.
Yes.
Can you tell us more about that?
For example, if a child has a minor setback and the child feels bad, like for example, typically it's a class test. They're not too happy about the class test results. So a child is distraught. There's a saying that goes that failure is the mother of success, right? So I think help the child label their feelings and not to dismiss their feeling, just to understand that it's okay to feel sad and disappointed because everybody wants to do well, all right? But in life, you don't always get what you want, all right? Even you're very well prepared for it. There's always these things that you cannot control for. right? And it's okay to feel that way, but the feeling is transient and it will pass. And you can take this opportunity to learn like what went wrong in the test, and maybe you can do something about it and improve on it, so you don't make the same mistake twice.
Yeah, well, that's actually very good
So
advice. Yeah.
rather than say, okay, it's all right, I'll go and talk to the teacher and see whether they can get you more marks. And I think that's not helpful. Right?
That's true. Or like suddenly sign up for a lot of tuition classes.
Exactly. And when the child is not ready for additional classes and all that, you might be packing the child too much activities, learning activities, that the child can't cope and then will feel bad about himself.
I see. That's interesting. Having heard you say that, I wanted to sidetrack a little bit about talking to children, right? So some parents might think, hearing this, okay, you don't need to shield them. They might tell the children too many things. I mean, have you come across these cases where parents might cause their children more stress than necessary by sharing too much in their lives?
Well, first thing first, a child's attention is quite short, so you can't overshare things. Try not to overshare things. But it's important to share, some maybe relevant experiences. I often share about my personal experiences with my patients in the clinic because it makes me a human, because I'm not infallible. So I sometimes make the same mistakes as them when I was younger, right? And it's okay. It's not the end of the world. Yeah. So it must be strategic. So you just share what is relevant and don't overload a child and make it more confusing for the child.
So what would you say to parents feeling lost when their child seems emotionally overwhelmed?
Okay. So let's say the parents are at a loss after trying all those things that we talk about. Don't feel that you're alone in this. It's okay to seek help, all right? Talk to your spouse, talk to your relatives, family, friends. Seek help from the school, teachers, and counselor. And if need to, if you're not sure whether there's any mental health concern, you could see a counselor or a psychologist. There may not be a need to rush to see a psychiatrist because it could be quite stigmatizing, So
or maybe talk to people.
Yes.
Go to a GP, maybe? Go to the polyclinic?
Yeah, exactly. A child typically would have a familiar family doctor that he has grown up with. Let the doctor talk to the child. If need to, the family doctor can make a referral to a mental health professional, right? So you don't have to do this by yourself. There's even a caregiver support group. In fact, there's probably more than one in Singapore, whereby you can actually be a member and then also talk to the fellow parents, fellow caregivers with family members that have mental health problems or going through a tough time. And finally, is about self-care. Don't be too harsh on yourself. Don't expect yourself to be a perfect father or mother. We make mistakes too. Don't, right? Be gentle on yourself and be kind to ourselves. I tell everybody that, even for the child too, when they feel that they've done a bad job. So don't be too harsh on yourself. Be kind and gentle. Right?
That's modeling that as well for the child, right? Okay, great. Do you have any final thought before we end?
I think we've covered most bases. And of course, the last part is about healthy lifestyle. For everybody, adequate sleep, good nutrition, exercises to improve blood circulation. Right. All these are pillars of good health.
Right. Unfortunately, those are things that people don't really want to hear. But they're very important. I agree.
Definitely.
Okay. Great. Thanks a lot, Dr. Ong. Thanks for your insights today.
You're welcome.
Well, that's a wrap for Health Check, a podcast series by the Straits Times. Don't forget to follow Health Check for free on your favorite audio apps, Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Like us and give us a rating. This episode is edited by Amiru Karim. Thanks for listening.
Send your feedback to podcast@sph.com.sg. Find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or within our Straits Times app. Thanks for listening.